Hello and welcome, GCS community. We are so excited to see you all here today for our first ever Fireside Chat on the topic of literacy and the science of reading. And I am really excited to have some of our GCS teammates here today from different schools, different departments, different grade levels to share their perspectives, wisdom, and expertise around literacy. So we are going to go ahead and get started for today by starting with introductions. So my name is Rhonda Baldenegro. I am the Executive Director of Gabriella Charter Schools. And for those of you who may be new with the organization, I've been here since 2012 as an assistant principal, as a principal, as our Director of Instruction, and now in my current role. And prior to coming to GCS, I was an elementary teacher and an instructional coach for multilingual learners in LA Unified, and I was also a gifted coordinator. So that is my background in literacy. So I'm going to turn it over to the team to introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. My name is Albert Rivas. I teach 8th grade humanities at GCS 1. I've been with GCS since 2011, so it's been quite some time. I started off as an instructional aide, did some intervention teacher work, and have been the 8th grade teacher since 2013, so I've been there for a while. I love that age group. Prior to GCS, my experience is limited. GCS is the only school I've worked full-time for sure, but prior to that, I worked with students on the road from high school to college, so it was that in-between time for them.
My name is Anne-Marie Hatley, and I am a 3rd grade teacher at GCS 2. I started at GCS 2 with the founding of the school back in 2017, I think. But I began my teaching career in 2010 in Las Vegas. I primarily have taught 2nd and 3rd grade, but I was also an instructional strategist and Title I specialist right before coming to Gabriella. And the past few years, I've gotten to specialize in teaching just ELA to 3rd graders, which has been a wonderful time.
Hi, everyone. My name is Clara Mons. I've been with GCS since the dawn of time, not really, but since 2005, when GCS was founded. And I have been the 1st grade teacher there. And I previously worked as a 1st grade teacher in Compton Unified School District. And I have been at GCS for a long time. And I've been a teacher, an instructional specialist, worked with our multilingual learners, done a lot with intervention, and I did a master's in reading and writing. So I am a big early literacy person with my 1st grade background and my just interest in reading.
Hi, everyone. Buenas noches. My name is Yonette Rodriguez, and I've been with GCS since 2012, and I've held many roles, including being an instructional aide for the multilingual learners, a teacher for them, a specialist for them, and currently I'm the part-time instructional specialist at GCS 1. Prior to being at Gabriella, I was a 2nd and 3rd grade teacher. And I am also a mom of twin boys who have dyslexia, so this topic is near and dear to my heart, and I've done some professional development just for myself outside of work, and I'm currently pursuing my PhD in education. That's why I work part-time.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Kimmy Mustafa. I am fairly new to GCS. I started just in July. I am the Director of Special Education. Prior to joining GCS, I have been a gen ed teacher, a SPED teacher, standard English language coordinator, an AM coordinator, early language and literacy coordinator. So all the coordinating of all the things, in addition to being an assistant director, assistant principal, and principal as well. So just been really exploring the world there. I am passionate about language and literacy. It is really foundational to opening up lots of doors. So it is something that most of whatever I've been teaching or working with students on is anchored in.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Stephanie Piazza. I am the principal at GCS 1. This is the start of my 5th year at our organization, which is really exciting. Prior to this role, I was our literacy and intervention specialist. Sorry, you can hear my kids. I've been a teacher for a long time. I was an academic dean. I've been a teacher coach for Teach for America. So I've had a lot of experience in and out of the classroom. And literacy is just a huge passion of mine. I think having taught middle school for a long time and seeing how exciting having access to reading and reading life is for middle schoolers is really inspiring, and it makes me want to make sure that all of our kids have that by the time they leave GCS, so that they have as many options as possible to them.
Well, thank you all for your introductions. And as you can see, staff and families, we've got an amazing, amazing array of experiences inside our organization, outside our organization, and just a lot of great expertise in literacy, both primary and intermediate and later literacy. So thank you all, panelists, for sharing that. So the first question I have for everybody, I would love to know, what is your favorite book for TK through 8th grade students, and why do you think it's so wonderful for that age range?
Okay, so I'm going first, and since I was going first, and also since my background is in the early grades, I decided to go in that direction, and I could not actually find my first choice book, which was Brown Bear, What Do You See by Eric Carle. But the reason I chose it was because I think it exemplifies something that, you know, really draws kiddos to books at that age, really at any age, which is it has rhythm, it has rhyme, it has repetition. I did find this book, which is called Chicka Chicka Boom Boom, which has a lot of the same. I found Five Little Monkeys, which also, I mean, it's literally a book made out of a rhyme. So when people are telling me, oh, my kid isn't really into being read to, like they run around, they can't focus, then usually one of the pieces of advice that I'll give them is like, go find a book like Brown Bear, and just start reading and be like, Brown Bear, what do you see? I see this looking at me, and like, see if the kid doesn't come over and like participate. Maybe they'll still run around, but like something that like really calls kiddos in, lets them participate, that rhythm and the rhyme. Same thing with teachers, like kindergarten, first grade, like my kids can't focus during the read aloud. Try something that has those elements, the rhythm, the rhyme, the repetition, and start there in terms of like getting kids engaged. So that's really something that I look for if I need to really engage younger kiddos, is books with those qualities.
All right, well, if I could buy a book for every single kid in the world, it would be The Phantom Tollbooth. I think it is such a magical book. It's probably one of the original graphic novels, so it's got pictures inside of it, relatively short chapters, and it's most fun if you read the whole book, but you can also pick chapters just to read by themselves. They kind of stand alone. And I think this book is really special for almost every age. I think even 5-year-olds could attend to small parts of it because it's really playful. It's really magical. It's definitely a fantasy book, but it seems like it could happen to you. So I think it's just draws students in, and, you know, it's old. So there's like some old school, there's an old movie that kids get kind of a kick out of because it looks so different than movies today. So if you want to, you know, reinforce what you've read with a movie, which I think is a great idea, it's a really good book for that too.
So for the book that I thought of, there's so many, But one of my favorite series is Mo Willems' Piggy and Elephant books. And it is something that is most commonly known for in kindergarten and first grade. But honestly, it is just for everyone. Like there are some parts where I'm like I'm entertained by this and I'm an adult. And it's one of those things that almost any child can read or any person can read. So being silly or shocked, it also lends well to when students are writing. So there's like exclamation marks and speech bubbles and wild punctuation and ellipses. So it is something that I've always used to connect to writing. So that one I think is really, really fun. Um, yeah, so that would be my favorite one. I also am like a sucker for books where kids can make up things like the book one or the book with no pictures because it's just silly and you can go along with it. It makes reading low stakes and accessible.
In the upper grades, specifically in eighth grade, our students could sometimes be skeptical or, don't necessarily listen to authority. So I try to harness that with this book here. Um, seems kind of blurry, but it's a Howard Zinn book. It's adapted from a Howard Zinn book, but it's a young people's history of the United States. Howard Zinn, as a historian, is he gives different perspectives when he delivers his history. And this book, adapted by Rebecca Steffoff, does the same, but delivers it so that kids could understand. And students are often very intrigued by the book and often want to compare it to other readings or the textbook that we have in class. So it's very engaging. And a lot of the times they come up with even more questions. And that's what I really like about it, is that once they create these questions, it drives them to investigate even more. And so they become agents of their own learning. So I really love the engagement that it has for our teens and preteens.
So my turn. It was really hard for me to pick a book, so I tried to think of a book that we read in third grade that kids and former students like always talk about. And we do this mystery unit in third grade. So we read The Absent Author, which is a reading A to Z mystery book. And I dress up like a detective and we get magnifying glasses and we start to make inferences about characters and we're talking about motives, and all the students get super engaged at trying to just decide who did what and why. And it's one of the first chapter books that a lot of students like read when we're transitioning into third grade, and it really hooks them in. It's a series book, so then they start to read more, and it's like then books are like chips and you're just like can't stop. And so I love when I do this unit and then suddenly the like bells are on, or the lights are on, and they're starting to want to read more and more of the series, and then it's a gateway to other series. And so it's just, I love their interest, and then it exposes them to other genres too, like mysteries, which I love. So that's my favorite book to do with third graders.
My favorite book is Good News, Bad News. It's a mostly wordless book. I would recommend it maybe even preschool to second or third grade, but I guess anybody could work with it. It is so engaging because you're basically making up the story as you go along. And every time you read it, you can read it differently. So as your child's getting older, it can be read in different ways. In fact, when I picked it up to show for this, my own children said, wow, that book was really intense. But it's only really intense if that's the way you tell it. And yeah, so it's very engaging because you make it up, but it also has a socio-emotional component because you have to understand how characters are feeling and understand why they're motivated to do the things they do so that you can tell the story. So I really love this game or this book, and I would recommend it to anyone, especially multilingual learners and their families, because the basis of reading is thinking, and you can do that in any language.
Well, thank you all so much. I have recorded all of those and I haven't read all of them myself, but sound like amazing choices. So thank you for sharing those all. Wanted to kind of get a little more into the science of reading and talk about evidence-based instruction. And so I really wanted to start by asking our instructional specialists and then sort of anyone else here, what does strong evidence-based literacy instruction mean to you?
That is such an important question. And when I think of strong evidence-based literacy instruction, I think it needs to include all of the components that lead to proficient reading. So we're talking about both those components that lead to decoding or being able to sound out the words, and then those components that lead to comprehension of the text. And Ms. Carla was going to show a visual that illustrates this. It's a model by Dr. Hollis Scarborough. It's called Scarborough's Rope. So there we go. We can think of proficiency towards reading as being composed of different substrands. The blue and the greens, those on the bottom, those lead to comprehension of the text, the language comprehension, and those on the top are related to word recognition. So when I'm looking for an evidence-based literacy program, that's what I'm looking for. And so you may say, well, these have to do with just reading, but we know that once students break that alphabetic code, they can connect sounds with letters and decode in English, then that will transfer to the writing. So this is what I'm looking for in terms of content of a strong instructional program around literacy. And of course, programmatically, you also want the program, to have monitoring and assessments built in and intervention and lots of resources for the teachers to use. So I feel like we have that at Gabriella because we actually have a combination of two programs. We have the Open Court Foundational Skills program to build up our phonics, our decoding, but then we use the readers and writers workshops to build the same skills. They reinforce the skills to some extent, but also build the readers and writers identity and higher order thinking. So those are some thoughts that I have around that. Thank you, Carla.
Okay, I think I'm next. I echo everything that Yone said. We have a lot of the same thoughts around literacy. And I think she actually made my point very well when she just said, like, oh, we use two programs. So I think, you can say, what are we looking for in a reading program? But I think one thing that we've found that I think probably many schools have found is that it's hard to say like one program is really going to like hit all of those things or hit all of those things in a way that works for our kiddos. So I think it's more of looking at, just what is the instruction that we are providing like throughout the day, even outside of the reading block, and making sure that we are hitting all those things. So for example, in that rope, down at the bottom, you have things like oral language and you have things like background knowledge. And so we're building that in social studies and science, right? Like throughout the day. And, oral language is something that we're building maybe during language, maybe during English language development. So I think it's really looking at kind of the program that we're providing as a whole and making sure that we're hitting all those things.
When I think, just to add, when I think about a strong program, I think about just taking into context the whole continuum of what students are doing. So often when people think of literacy or reading, they're automatically thinking of students just reading. And if a kid says, I can't read, then they are just excluded. Like I can't read. So therefore I opt out of literacy and reading altogether. So I just think about like reading actually first starts with sound. So nursery rhymes or singing or rhyming or making up words, all of those things that kids naturally do, just really encouraging that. And then it becomes like, oh my goodness, letters make songs and words, and all of those things kind of work together. So thinking about sounds and then communication, oral stories, those things, comprehension, how they all work together to really incorporate all people and all things kind of into learning.
And then I'll just add that something I really value about Gabriella is that any curriculum that we're using, we've spent a lot of time making sure that we vetted it, people have piloted it, meaning like a teacher has tried it for either a semester or a year before we broaden it to the wider teaching audience. And so I just feel really, really confident that the program that we've put forward is really well thought out and tested by people that work with your kids every day. So I think we have a lot of evidence for the programs that we use at Gabriella.
All right. So the next question I have is really, mostly geared toward the teachers, but would love to hear other folks' thoughts as well. So a family member, a parent, a caregiver comes in and says, how do I know if my child is growing in their reading and literacy skills? So I would love for you to kind of share with folks, how can families and students really measure growth and success in literacy? How can they, how do you know, how can they and other folks know that they're learning?
Yeah, I think from a qualitative standpoint, just thinking about kids at home, and it's just, I mean, for me, it's observations. If I see a kid with a book in their hand and they're reading, that's great. But then are they then making connections to what they're reading? Are they making text to text or text to self, text to world connections through their conversations? When they talk to, when they talk to their parents, are they making connections to what they read, or are they making connections to, to video games? I would prefer that they're making connections to what they're reading. Just like when we watch a movie, when we leave the movie theater, we want to talk about it. And that's the same way I think about books. So when they're done reading, do they want to talk about it? And if it's not happening, then there needs to be some growth in that aspect of making it a habit to read. And then once they are reading, are they enjoying the books? Are they interested in the books? Are they do they have these rich texts in front of them that make them want to read more and more and more? And so I think just based off of that, basic but super important observation, we're able to see the growth in students. There's times when students are very reluctant to read, but you put a great book in front of them, and then that's all they want to talk about. So yeah, so what are they talking about? Are they talking about their books, or is it something else? And preferably be about those books. And then it also makes me think about, as schools are going into standard-based grading, and I think about particularly about my eighth graders over time, if they're seeing these standards that we're working with, and they're able to get their grades, or they're able to see their assessments, and they're able to connect their grade to the particular standards. So when they are reading, they could be a little bit more conscious and do the meta work that will allow them to also seek ways to improve their grades, but also ultimately improve their reading. And that's really what we care about and what we want.
I definitely agree with Albert, and especially in the lower grades, like something that you would see is their reading habits. You would see them start to build their reading lives. We talk a lot about building our reading lives and what that looks like and what habits great avid readers have, from like finding a spot where you feel comfortable in your reading to talking about books. So like Albert said, like are your children talking about books? Are they excited to tell you what they're reading about? And then they might start to read more complex text. I think, especially like in the span of second grade to third grade, we're starting to really get into those chapter books at that age. So are they starting to read more complex text? And something that another habit that is of avid readers is that they choose books that they love and not just books that like other people are reading. They're actually choosing books that they're invested and interested in. So as a parent, we can also help find those books for our children. What interests does our child have, and how can we connect them to the right book with that? A lot of times, like trips to the library really help if you're able to do that. And really feeding that love of reading, because we want our students to have rich reading lives and really have those habits, not just at school, but also at home. Hopefully they're demonstrating them at home as well.
Any other thoughts from our team staff?
I can jump in. I am going to plug a program we use at Gabriella. I think iReady is a really meaningful tool for students, for families, for teachers and the education staff at our school. It's really neat that we use it across kindergarten through 8th grade. So it's a familiar thing as families grow and stay with us. And it also helps a student identify an area of growth. It helps teachers make better plans, especially for our small group instruction. And then families, especially as you get familiar with it, you can get a sense of, wow, my kid is really growing in this component of reading or math. And this is where they might still need some help.
Right. So the next question I have is for anyone here on the panel. Probably families and frankly, even educators probably get a lot of information about literacy. What works, what doesn't work. Sometimes there's conflicting information. But I would love to hear from you all. What is the biggest myth you've heard about how to support literacy and reading in children?
One thing that I've heard, especially working with younger ones, is if the adult or parent or guardian, etc., doesn't speak English, then they can't help with literacy instruction, or they can't help with learning how to read or anything else. And that is not true. So I've experienced students like foregoing these rich experiences because families are like, well, I can't like read in English, so I can't help. So I always encourage, you can read in home language, whatever home language is. You can ask questions, especially around comprehension questions, like what happened in the story? Why do you think this happened? Why does the character feel this way? What do you think is going to happen next? Any of those questions do go over well in any language, and it's still helping students to build those skills. What language you're proficient in should not hinder you from jumping into reading.
Something else that I think I've experienced a lot with my 3-year-old and my almost 6-year-old is they want to read the same book over and over again. And I'm so tired of those books. I don't want to read them anymore. But that repetition, just like Ms. Mons had mentioned earlier, even within a book or the same book over and over again, is going to build their fluency, their confidence. They're going to start recognizing sight words in the book. So even if it's frustrating as an adult to be like, I don't want to read this again, or I don't want to hear them say it again. It is a really, really good practice for students. And of course, we eventually want them to move on and try new books or new genres or new authors. But if they have that book that they're just carrying around all the time, it's not a bad thing for them to want the same book over and over again. It's actually doing a lot of great things for them to keep reading that same text or that same, my Juliana's hooked on Fancy Nancy right now. It's a lot, but she's feeling really good about herself, and it's influencing her fashion choices. And I think it's just really powerful to see them get excited about something and attach to it, even if it's annoying.
I always hear kids say, I don't like to read. And it's like, that's not true. It's like, you might not like what you have in front of you, but you like to read. We all like to read. So when kids say that, like, I kind of just laugh it off and just tell them that they're reading the wrong books, because eventually, they will find the right book and they'll see that they do love to read. Everyone loves to read. We just got to have the right material in front of us.
I've heard more. Oh, sorry, Clara.
Go, Yoni.
Thank you. My myth that I've heard relates more to older kids. It's more technical, but I've heard like that foundational skills that focus on the basics of reading is just for the younger kids, K through 3, where we're learning to read. But that's not always the case for everyone. And in fact, if we look at the rope model, those strands that relate to comprehension, we should start thinking about them as foundational skills for students in grades, whatever, 4 and up. Because that vocabulary knowledge, that background knowledge, the verbal reasoning, those are the foundational skills for the older students. So that's something I've heard.
And I was gonna echo what some people have been saying about like just different ways that families can support kiddos at home. And so something that I've come across is, I guess, the myth that parents or families should be pushing kiddos to read like by themselves if they're learning to read. So, a lot of parents might say, I try to read with him or her, the child, and they're really getting stuck on every word, and then we both get frustrated. Or they keep wanting me to like read to them, but I know that like right now they're working on learning to read, so they should be reading. Like I shouldn't read to them anymore. And that, I think, one is a myth, because like often what's getting described to me is something that's like detrimental to finding joy in reading, both for the family and for the child. So I always want to say that, we should try to make reading at home a happy experience, like something that is bringing us together, and that everyone enjoys, grown up and child, or older sibling and child. And that, yes, they're learning to read, but learning to read is not just them reading, all by themselves and struggling through each word. They also need to do reading together. You can read the book and then let them read the second time. You can both read together. You can like echo read, where you read a sentence, your kiddo reads a sentence. There's lots of ways to do it to make sure that y'all are reading together and that it's not getting to a place of frustration.
All
I'll
right.
just so no, go ahead, Rhonda, because what I was going to say ties into the next question anyways.
All right. Well, then I will proceed, Miss Hatley. So the sort of the final question that I have for our panelists are, our families are here. We're going to have staff tuning in. We've recorded this, so we're going to share it with others. And probably sort of the $1 million question is, what is the top recommendation that you have for families to support literacy interest and excellence outside of school?
So we've talked a lot about reading today, so I want to talk a little bit about writing. I think I love writing, and one of the lower elementary genres that can be most challenging for students is personal narratives. And something that is just so easy for families to do is to tell stories together and to just see like things that happen in everyday life as inspiration for a story, for students to write their own personal narrative, see their lives as writers, and families can just tell stories together. And I think there is, going back to the myth, there is the myth that like my student isn't a good writer, or even students feel like I can't write, but a lot of times the story is there and there's just other things like blocking them from getting it out on paper. But if a student is able to tell a story and add what people said and add those little details, and you can tell it together as a family, I feel like that's so powerful and just helps kids see themselves as writers. And it just like really brings like fun into the classroom, and it just helps them, when I'm conferencing with them, think of things that they can actually write about, because they see themselves as writers and they see their lives as inspiration for writing, because that's like what a lot of professional authors do. Their lives are inspiration for how they write. So starting that early on is just really great for kids.
I would recommend just reading different things. So if it's graphic novels, if it's personal narratives, like people telling their own story, like Jaden Toussaint and his adventures, like it's all from his point of view, or someone else narrating the story. I would say just get into different genres. Do tie in like how you feel about it, like what, that was crazy, commentary, all of those different things. Really do all the things to make it fun. I know this is going to sound really old timey, but visit the library because they have so many things, so many books. Sometimes authors come to speak. If you're exposing your child or someone that you're caring for to all sorts of books, oftentimes you don't want to buy all of them, or you're like, where am I going to fit all of these in my house? That's where I am. So if you borrow it from the library, you can always take them back. You can get into series and things like that. So to the library, commentary on books, write your own stories because it is fun. And often students can emulate what they see in the writing, see in the books that they're reading. So great authors didn't become great authors overnight. So when students try and go back to their stories, they refine all their processes as well.
These are really great suggestions. I'm coming from the point of view of being a mother of students who were reluctant readers. And so my top recommendation is to pursue the passions that your kids have. What are they interested in talking about and learning about? Just exploring, and the opportunities for literacy will come from that. For example, my kids are passionate about films and how movies are made since a young age. So that led to like going to museums that had exhibits about movies, or finding the books in the library about movies, how movies are made, or the novelization of a movie. Even reading the captions on movies and telling the movies plot to grandparents and other people. And now one of my kids writes reviews on a platform about movies. So all the literacies, it gets covered if you explore what they're interested in and you get them thinking. Because what's the point of us being able to read letters on a page or put the letters on the page if we're not thinking, if we're not going to use that literacy for joy, learning, or advocacy, or whatever purpose you may have. So just follow the kids' passion, like really listen and really follow their lead, I'd say.
Oh, it's my turn. So I was gonna be like Kemi and be like, go to the library, but I will add on one great thing about the library, and we have so many great libraries in LA, so many great branch libraries, and the main library, which is like a beautiful, magical place that has so many other things than books. I think like the library, just like being there, there's so many things that are an activity, an art project, a cooking class. I just like pulled up the webpage a little while we were on the webinar earlier of the Central Library, and just like looking at the list of things is amazing. So even kids who are not going to like really want to check out a book or be interested in that, just going there and taking advantage of all the like free programming that the library has. Lots of libraries have like the kiddo room that has books, but it also has like toys and puzzles, like things for them to do. And I know I like took my kids there frequently because it's a free space, and then the books happen to be there. So, it's just proximity. And so maybe we did, then maybe we pick up a book. And then somebody should plug we have an upcoming day, at the library. So I will let Carla maybe, or
September 30th.
Yeah, September 30th, we have an upcoming day. So great opportunity to plug that for folks.
Yeah, I definitely agree going to the library, but I know people were going to mention that. And at the same token, I want to echo what Yonah said. Feeding their passion is gonna be my top recommendation, especially for those reluctant readers. When they have a book that they have in front of them and it's about something they're very passionate about, they're not even gonna see it as reading. They're gonna see it as their hobby. So once that happens, their confidence as a reader is also being built. So little by little, they are going to see themselves not only as a gamer, but also as a reader. And they become these experts in whatever field they want by reading. Oftentimes, these experts in whatever field, what they're going to have in common is that they're able to read at a very high level. And if we're feeding their passion through these books, they'll become great readers and they'll be able to do what they want.
Well, if you know me, I'm gonna double, triple, quadruple down on the library, and it is an embarrassment of riches to be in Los Angeles and to have exposure to so many libraries. I'm gonna tear up about it. I think it's like the most magical place. We have the city library, the county library. If you're near Echo Park, you can pop over to the Glendale libraries. And I literally look every day at the calendar for events, because that's my gateway with my 3 and my 5-year-old. Like, oh, there's bubbles at the library, and then they immediately after, they know we're going to go to the kids section. And so there's just, at all times of the day, there's something you can do with kids at the library. So I know it got said, but I gotta say it. And then the other thing, even if it's really hard for you to read, or you have a lot going on, I know how busy families are. If you can, even for 5 minutes a day, your kid can see you sitting like this anywhere in your house, what a big deal that is, because then they see themselves in you. Oh, mom's reading. That must be important. That must be fun. Oh, what is that? Oh, there's a drawing in her book. And so even when like, oh, there's chaos in my house, everybody, wow, all the time, the moment the two of them seem like they're a little settled, even if I'm in the middle of dinner, I put it on, the burner on low, put the oven off for a few minutes, and I make sure they see me even for 5 minutes. Because they know that then that's something so special to mommy. She's making time for it, even though the laundry's everywhere or whatever's going on. And so even if it's hard for you, or there's a lot of things happening, even 5 minutes every couple of days, what a big deal that is to your kid, because they look up to you so much. Even if they're middle schooler and you don't think they do, they want to be just like you. And what better thing to be than a reader?
Well, that was a mic drop last comment. So thank you, Steph, for sharing that. And thank you for all of your wisdom. We have teachers and learning specialists and directors and principals, and just what an amazing conversation today. We do have a few minutes for a question, maybe even two. If any folks have a question, you can just drop it in the chat. And we hope we have time for a few of those. So we'll wait for just a second. And I will take the time now to do a shameless plug because we are going to continue to have fireside chats. We are going to talk about math. We're going to talk about restorative justice. We are going to be talking about arts and dance. We're going to be talking about parent advocacy. And so we have one of these every couple of months, and we're recording them, and we're going to be sharing them with our school community analysts, maybe even on LinkedIn. Don't be mad at me if we do that. Yeah, so please keep coming if you enjoyed today's session. So thank you all so much. It looks like we do not have any questions just yet. So I am going to thank you all. Thank you to Mr. Rivas, our 8th grade humanities teacher at GCS 1. Thank you to Ms. Hatley, our 3rd grade teacher at GCS 2. Thank you to Dr. Mustafa, our director of special education. Thank you to Ms. Mons, our GCS 2 instructional specialist, GCS 1 instructional specialist, Yone Rodriguez, and our principal, Ms. Piazza at GCS 1. Thank you guys so much. And yes, Ms. Alcaraz, we are definitely going to be doing one for math as well. Stay tuned. I wish everybody a very, very wonderful evening, and thank you for joining us for our first GCS Fireside Chat. Bye, guys.